Hello and welcome to All for United. You are watching another Ben Talks 2, and this week I thought we'd do a bit of a spin on the normal show. At the moment, Manchester United finances and the league's finances are massively in question, with every day something new coming out, whether it's something about Manchester United's most recent financial statement or whether it's about the European Super League. Lots are being spoke about the finances in football. So I thought what would be great to do today is to break all that down, to do a little show around, and I don't want to call it this, Kieran, but I'm going to say it anyway, because there's a very popular book brand out there called For Dummies. And I actually would love to do a show right now where myself as a football fan, I don't pretend to know anything about the financial structures of football clubs and ask you the questions that I'm dying to ask someone on the tip of my tongue about all this, because we had a chat off camera a little bit about this. And I think it's perfect for fans to be able to digest what we're just about to talk about instead of reading other tweets and making up their own assumptions. So before we get going, I should introduce you first, Kieran Maguire, Price of Football. Thank you so much for coming on. By the day in the university working on finances within football, what is it about financial structure or finances in football that you love, Kieran?
I think football is unique if you compare it to any other business where the aim is purely to make profit. Football, we've got some owners who do want to make profit. We want some owners who want glory. We want some owners who want success on the pitch. We as football fans, we're in love. We're in love with our clubs. And if you're in love with someone or something, you want to know everything about it. So that's why the financial side of things becomes more important, perhaps more important than it should be. But the amount of attention that a club such as Manchester United gets when they publish their results is completely out of proportion to the actual size of the company. It's a relatively small company. It makes revenues of £500 million a year. There's hundreds and hundreds of companies that do far more than that, but it's Manchester United. It's a global brand, and therefore we all take an interest in not just United. I think all fans these days tend to have a sneak peek as just they want to make sure that their club's going to be around in a year's time, and they want to know where the money's been spent.
I suppose the first big question, Kieran, really is why, in your experience, do you think that the Manchester United financial situation is scrutinised so much? Obviously, I can say there's obvious answers and I can say those and I'll reflect them afterwards. But in your experience, seeing the tweets you get and looking at the outcry when the results come in, why do you think that there's so much skepticism and eyes on them?
Well, since the Glazer takeover in 2005, the club has spent around about £850 million paying banks interest on loans. So that hasn't happened at any other club. Manchester United is a huge club, and it's got fans all over the world. So all of those fans want to know exactly what's happening as far as United are concerned. If you talk to people in the media, they know that Manchester United attracts attention when they put in columns in print, in sports sections of online forums and things of that nature. So anything to do with Manchester United is news. The Glazer situation, the way that the club was acquired, the fact that it's registered in the Cayman Islands, which is an offshore tax haven, gets people intrigued. The fact that Manchester United tends to be the only club that pays money to shareholders. Other clubs don't. The other clubs tend to reinvest the money directly in the squad, and clearly that upsets some United fans. Some take a more relaxed view. Manchester United is news. It's as simple as that.
Is there a way to reflect kind of what you've just said there? Completely spot on with the Glazers, and I think the takeover of United and our owners are probably the standout reason for, as a fan, that we have a look at our financial situation, plus also the debt that is there, because the number is quite rightly scary for anyone to have a look at without any background knowledge of it. But for you, how normal or abnormal is it? And let's put this into business perspective, looking at it just as a blank canvas, right? Manchester United Football Club, to have the money being taken out of it, as it is as owners, how normal is that for a company of Manchester United's size in the business world, maybe? But also in terms of the debt, that amount of debt for a business the size of Manchester United, How normal and abnormal is that as well? You might want to split that in two parts.
Those are both, I would say, fairly textbook. Manchester United pay around about £22 million a year to the owners in the form of dividends. If that was a retailer, if that was a manufacturer, for a club, for a company making that amount of money, nobody would blink. And in fact, if you are a company that is quoted and is traded on the stock exchange, there's an expectation from the stock market that you will pay money to shareholders on a regular basis, unless you're committing to build the company significantly. And Manchester United, remember, it's been around for over a century, so it's a mature company, and therefore we normally expect mature companies to pay money out. In terms of the debt, debt is only a problem if you cannot make your repayment targets. And Manchester United always pay the interest, which is due on the loans. Those loans themselves aren't due in terms of the capital. So what Manchester United have, in effect, is an interest-only mortgage. And if you have one of those, you've not got a problem until the day you've got to repay the capital. And what is likely to happen to United as they get closer and closer towards that repayment date is that Ed Woodward and his team will speak to the banks and say, look, you're getting 20 odd £million a year in interest from us. We always pay it. It's guaranteed. I know the loan is due for repayment in, I think it's 2025, 2027 when it's going to be. Do you fancy pushing it down the road, and we'll make that repayment date 2032? And the banks will say, yeah, we're more than happy with that. United is a cash cow. It generates money from a variety of sources every year, very successfully. From a bank's point of view, they would see it as a very low risk loan, and it saves them the hassle. Because remember, if United repay them that £500 million that they owe, then the bank's got to go and lend it to somebody else. So it's extra hassle. So why not just continue to lend it to the club for the foreseeable future?
I mean, I don't know if anyone out there's watching. Please get in the comments. If you've got any more questions, please get in the comments. Obviously, you can also message Kieran on Twitter to ask him any outstanding questions you have that potentially we don't hit on. But I'll be honest, Kieran. It's the point of these shows. I've struggled with debt in the past, and I had to go on a repayment plan over a period of time when I wasn't earning a great deal of money, where I was paying out interest. So this doesn't just happen in business. This happens in personal circumstances as well. And the argument is always, and it'd be great to have a reflection from you on this. The argument is always, oh, if we don't have any debt, we could make transfers happen. If we didn't have any debt, we could make improvements to the stadium. And that 20 million could be put here and there. There's always people who are skeptical. But also, in the personal situation, when I was in my situation, I would have loved to have had 50 quid to be able to go and buy a ticket to go and watch United play. But I didn't have that money then, so I couldn't do it. These cliches and these statements, there's just no method to them, is there? It's not the right way to look at this.
No, I mean, the Glazers initially borrowed the money to buy the club, effectively mortgaging Manchester United Stadium and its reputation, with a view to expanding the commercial arm, which it has done very successfully. And I know fans will always want clubs to spend more money on players. Manchester United do spend an awful lot of money on players. It's not the quantity of players. It's not the quantity of money. It's the quality of the players that I think has been the issue. I'm not a Manchester United fan, but as an outside observer, you'd say the transfer policy has been pretty much hit and miss. Yeah, Bruno Fernandes looks excellent. Harry Maguire, so-so. You had Alexis Sanchez issue. You had the likes of Veron and Angel Di Maria. Romelu Lukaku didn't quite work out at Manchester United. So the money has been spent, but the success rate hasn't been superb. And I think that's something that the club's going to address. In terms of cash and debt, I genuinely don't see a problem with United's debt. If the club is not winning trophies, it's a convenient stick about which we can beat the Glazers. And there's no love for the Glazers, I think, from the vast majority of Manchester United fans. I used to teach at university in Manchester.
Kieran, quickly on that, would you agree with the statement that a lot of, and this isn't me contradicting the statement because I believe it hate the Glazer ownership. I don't think we've progressed under them, but that isn't so much because of the financial situation of the club. That's because of the structure of the club and the fact we haven't gone anywhere under them, so to speak. But would you agree with the statement that is often used as something that you mentioned there to back the Glazers with, that they are bleeding the club dry? Is that evident in the statistics you look at?
No, they're not bleeding the club dry. If they're going to pick up around about £20 million in dividends themselves this year, that's going to be, the salaries of 2 players. Now, I'm sure United fans would rather have that money invested in 2 players in terms of their salaries, but just because you pay a player a big amount of money, it doesn't necessarily work. You just got to look again to Alexis Sanchez as an example of that. They're not bleeding the club dry. Would a successioned managers rather have an extra £20 million a year in their transfer budget, in their wage budget? Of course they would. You talk to every manager, and anybody that's ever spoken to a football club manager said, would you rather have more money or less? They're always going to say more. But then surely that applies to us in all aspects of our lives.
Very good point.
If you take a look at where I think there were significant problems in respect of Manchester United and its finances, it was the early years of the Glazer ownership when they were paying up to £100 million a year in interest to the banks, because the banks were a little bit wary about the club's ability to repay them. But that's no longer an issue. I think Sir Alex Ferguson managed the club extremely well during that period where he wasn't able to spend perhaps as much as he wanted. But the paradox about Manchester United is that since the club rescheduled the loans and repaid a wee bit of them at a time of the flotation, the interest has gone down significantly, and we've seen a succession of managers in the shape of Moyes, Van der Gaal, Mourinho, and now Solskjaer come in, and they've not delivered the Premier League trophy. And if Manchester United were winning the big trophies, nobody would give a damn about the finances. It's because they're not winning trophies and people are looking round. Now, is Manchester United's lack of success on the pitch due to increased competition in the likes of Liverpool, Chelsea, and Manchester City, who have caught up and perhaps overtaken Manchester United? Or is it due to simply that the money's been poorly spent? I'm not qualified to talk about that. I'm just a dweeb with a spreadsheet.
Well, we're enjoying the fact that you are that, if you say you're that, Kieran, because I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's great, and I think it's good to talk about these areas that are always pointed out and try and get some realization around them, I suppose. That's not me trying to say, hey, change your mind, you should be Glazer in. This is me trying to say, well, wait a second, if we're making statements and we're actively going after people, there's got to be some sort of factual element to those statements, and that's why I'm asking you these questions, Kieran. And again, something else that I want to throw out there, and something else that people have been saying, especially since Champions League football become as lucrative as it did with the Adidas deals and the other sponsorships around the club. Question marks thrown out at whether the club board, the owners, care about really investing the squad to win the league, if actually they're just happy settling with anywhere in that top 4 because they get the financial reward for it, more than if it was just as much even if it was 4th or first place. Again, I don't know if I worded that question right. Hopefully I did and you understood it. What do you think about that statement? Is that a statement you think is necessarily true or not?
I don't think it is true, to be honest, because if you take a look at sponsor arrangements, Manchester United get bonuses when they win big trophies from Chevrolet, from some of the other major sponsors. So there is a benefit to Manchester United on the pitch in achieving these objectives. Also, if you take a look at the way that money is allocated by UEFA, getting to the Champions League final, even when you're in the Champions League group games, there's a series of pots of money, and those pots of money are allocated on where you finished in your own domestic league in the previous season. So there is a significant benefit, because one of those pots is 40% goes to the team that finished top, 30% second, 20% third, and 10% if you finish fourth. So Manchester United, it's costing them money from UEFA if they don't win the Premier League. I think the argument that the Manchester United ownership want to be the new Arsenal, and it was always levelled at Arsene Wenger that he was happy to finish third or fourth, and that was the limit of his ambitions. I don't think it's actually valid, because it's not because of they care about Manchester United or they don't care. They care about money, and they will be financially better off if Manchester United win trophies through broadcasting, through sponsorship and commercial arrangements and the bonuses that brings in, and also from the fact that they'll be able to go and charge more for hospitality things at when they're hosting matches, especially in the final rounds of European competitions.
Just moving on slightly to the financial statements. Why do United do this? Because, as you say, there's a lot of light on Manchester United whenever these quarterly, I think they are, statements come out. And you don't tend to see results like this broadcast for other football clubs. So why is it that United do this?
Well, Manchester United, as I'm sure fans are aware, that they're registered in the Cayman Islands, and their shares are traded in New York on what's referred to as the Nasdaq market. Now, all other football clubs in England are private companies. And under UK company law, if you're a private company, you only have to publish your accounts once a year. Whereas if you are traded in New York on a public stock market, then you have to have quarterly updates. So this is actually a statutory price to pay for Manchester United deciding to go and list the company in New York. Rather than keep it private here in the UK, because under the first few years of the Glazer ownership, until was it 2012, they did keep the company private, and they only produced one set of annual figures.
So is this quite unique for a football club, Kieran, or can you think off the top of your head any other clubs who are in a similar situation in the world or in Europe?
Well, within Europe, we do have clubs such as Juventus, Dortmund, and a few others who do have publicly quoted shares. So Juventus, under European law, only have to go and publish their accounts twice a year, as opposed to 4 times in the US. So it's unusual for a football club to have its accounts being published in a different country. And that's the issue which is driving Manchester United here.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, that we've got to be so transparent, and we talk about them a lot. And as you say, they're received with a lot of skepticism. We spoke about this earlier on, and one question that did come in, Kieran, which again, we're hit on some questions here because, as I said, I want the show to be really transparent and a bit like a Q&A. So moving on to a question that came out about United releasing these financial statements, and we're actually going to go over some really interesting tweets that Kieran has put out, sort of explaining what everything means, and there's a few graphs in there. I'm going to get them up on the screen if that's all right with you, Kieran, so people can actually see them too. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, by the way, guys. If you're loving the video, hit a like, share it as well. One of the questions that come through from our Twitter account at All for United is how factual do these, well, let me word the question exactly how it is and then put my spin on it. How factual do these quotations and figures have to be? I take it these are legally binding figures, so they can't come out and over egg certain figures or understate other figures. These have to be bang on the money, right, Kieran?
Yes. I mean, these are unaudited figures that have been published by Manchester United via its press release. But I'm 99.9% certain that they will tie in with the actual audited figures. Manchester United's board of directors would have they would suffer huge reputational damage if they put out figures that were misleading, because the stock market simply wouldn't trust them again. So it's not in their interest to do so. I know Ed Woodward has splits opinion in terms of the reaction of the fan base, but he's worked in finance all of his life. He knows the consequences of deliberately misleading a market, and I don't think it's an avenue that he would ever countenance. So regardless of what fans may think about the Woodwards, Ed Woodward and the Glazers, there is no incentive for them to mislead, because these things will catch up on you as soon as the accounts are audited. And the auditors get paid extremely well, by the way, at Manchester United. So they're there for a fair amount of time checking the numbers. There's no way I would expect them to overstate figures or understate others.
It's great to have you on, Kieran. It's fantastic that you've actually crunched some of the statements and some of the figures down for us. You've put this out on your Twitter as well. What I'm going to do is so people can go and have a look at these as well. I'm going to get them up on the screen as we're talking here. So hopefully people will be able to see this. So Kieran, at Kieran Maguire, Kieran's put together a thread. Do you want to quickly hit on, Kieran, what the thread entails and why you put it out?
Well, for my sins, I actually monitor all 92 clubs in England and some others in Europe and non-league and Scotland and so on. So whenever a club puts out results, I try to summarise them. And I was probably about halfway through the total summary when I was booked to come on your show, Ben. So that's why it's not quite a full set of numbers, and I'll top it up when we finish our chat. It's simply because fans do have an interest in their clubs. I mean, other people do this as well. I would thoroughly recommend that people follow, if they've got any interest in this. The king of football finance is a guy called the Swiss Ramble, who I'm sure many fans are familiar with. So I just tend to put this out to give people an indication as to a number by itself is meaningless. So what I've tried to do here is to look at the trends. Is Manchester United's income, is it rising compared to previous years? But also, one of the things we're always doing as football fans is we're comparing our clubs to those of others. To others who in our peer group. So as well as looking at sort of United's history over, I've got here a 10-year period, I've compared it to the other clubs in the Premier League, although to date only Manchester United have published their 2020 results. So I'm comparing to the figures in 2019, and I think that sort of highlights the impact of COVID. COVID's had really hit Manchester United, as it's all clubs. The other thing that really hit Manchester United in 2020 was it only qualified for the Europa League compared to the Champions League. And the way that UEFA dole out money in terms of broadcast income is that 80% of it goes to the Champions League. So United were comparatively going to struggle a wee bit compared to 2019.
Yeah, and I take it the Champions League qualification for this year will be in next year's results, right? Because that'll take about 12 months to filter through. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So yeah. Manchester United always prepare their accounts to the 30th of June. The other thing which has really hit the club is that, first of all, matches were taking place behind closed doors, which was bad news. But Manchester United actually played 10 fixtures in July and August this year, in July and August 2020. Which was after the accounts were published. The accounts are up to the 30th of June. So all of the TV money for those 10 matches is going to appear in the 2021 accounts. So as you can see here, they've had a big hit, 118 million pounds decrease in income. Over 100 million pounds of that was due to a decrease in TV money.
Yeah, I mean, your frontline sentence there, so to speak, Kieran, which really hammers it down, is obviously the total revenue is down, as you've mentioned there, 18% due to a combination of COVID, not qualifying for the Champions League. But as you've just added on there, also, there's about 10 games plus the latter stages of the Europa League competition as well, the television broadcast money will not be accredited to these accounts and these books. So even with that worrying statistic there, we're still not seeing the full picture here of COVID, are we? The impact that's had.
No, I mean, if realistically, COVID is costing Manchester United probably around about £4 million a match every time they play at Old Trafford, due to lost revenue from ticket sales. So if you think that over a full season, that's going to cost them £100 million in gate receipts. That the club is also going to suffer as a result of rebates given to broadcasters, which I think are going to be paid out, some of them in 2021, partly by the Premier League, partly by UEFA. So they have had some fairly big hits, but they're not alone. Other clubs are going through similar similar scenarios.
Yeah, and just scrolling down to this one here, Kieran. Of course, United have always maintained as one of the highest revenue earners in the Premier League for many, many years. Of course, we haven't seen Liverpool and City's numbers yet, as you've mentioned, but you've put in the graph anyway, sort of where United are off the latest figures compared to every other club. And you've stated that you'd expect us to maintain that position, but probably only just.
Yes, I mean, United had quite a big lead over both Liverpool and Manchester City in 2019. If you think that United's income was 627, so that, looking at these numbers, they're around about 90 million pounds ahead. United had said that they'd expected income to fall in 2020 due to the fact that they weren't taking place in the Champions League. Liverpool clearly had a very successful season. They won the Premier League. They did reasonably well in the Champions League as well. They got lots of bonuses coming in from sponsors. They'd renegotiated with Standard Chartered. So I think Liverpool were potentially going to take over United in 2020. Now, whether that will still come through, I'm not certain. And to a certain extent, who cares? Because again, we don't support a football club to be first or second in this particular table. But when it comes to Liverpool, Manchester United, any opportunity for bragging rights. I teach at the University of Liverpool. I've lived most of my life in Manchester. I know the lack of love between the two cities.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kieran, we're definitely not having a parade. We're not having a parade for being top of the overall revenue earners in that chart. I can tell you that for one thing. But you are right. It's bragging rights still somewhere. I suppose if Liverpool do end up having a better year than us this year, again, more questions will be asked because, as you said, the gap was so much bigger before these results came in. But again, it's such a weird year. We've just got to wait and see what happens. Your insight's so crucial, and I think looking at this, the match day income, and this is a worrying statistic, isn't it? Really. Because United are losing out on a lot of money, and by not having those Champions League nights, we know not as many people attended the group stage of the Europa League as they would have done if it was the group stage of the Champions League. That's always going to affect this number in 2020, isn't it? But also the added extra of COVID is just that's the lowest. That's the lowest since probably records began. Looking at this graph, it's the lowest in a very long time.
Yeah, it's certainly the lowest in the last decade. I mean, there are genuine reasons for it. I think the concerning thing from Manchester United's perspective is that figure of 90 could be zero in 2021, and it's going to be zero for all the other clubs as well. But because United were initially at the top of the table, it's going to hit them. And as you see from this particular analysis, even though they missed out on 5 or 6 home games, which took place in July and August, and therefore aren't included in these figures, Manchester United are still pretty much at the top of the Premier League. Arsenal's figures will end up below those of Manchester United once the 2020 numbers come through. But as far as Manchester United are concerned, they have the success because they charge pretty high prices. Certainly nowhere compared to some of the London clubs, but with a 75,000 or 76,000 capacity stadium, they have an advantage in terms of the volume of tickets that they can sell compared to everybody else.
Yeah, it's really interesting going through these numbers because, again, looking at them on a graph, it sort of shows you, you see like the COVID trends, you see the economic trends as well. Being able to just look at your football club and actually see where these numbers are at, it gives you a realization to the situation the club's in. And I saw something the other day actually where people were saying, do you know what? We were moaning about the fact that we couldn't sign Sancho. You would have wanted the club to sign Sancho when they're looking at figures like this behind the scenes. Like there's a bigger picture to all this, isn't there, Kieran? And I think this graph here really shows where that Champions League broadcast money is so important, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, as we discussed earlier, the Champions League is worth 80% of the money which is paid out by UEFA. So it was the most important thing that Manchester United did post-COVID. It wasn't winning the Europa League. It was going from 6th to 3rd. That's worth far more money to the club. because they would have suffered financial penalties from Adidas if they hadn't qualified for the Champions League for 2 years consecutively. These numbers do reflect the fact that matches were taking place in July and August. The Premier League is going to have to give a rebate of around about £336 million to broadcasters for last season. So that's going to hit each club by 16, 17 million. Since then, the Premier League has lost the Chinese TV deal. That's worth another £9 million a year to clubs. So there's going to be, everybody's going to be hit. So just take these figures here, the fact that United are so far behind the other members of the Big Six. I wouldn't get too worked up about them, because once Chelsea, Arsenal, Spurs, Liverpool and so on, once they publish their accounts for 2020, I'd expect all of those numbers to fall significantly as well.
But the commercial department, Kieran, are doing their job.
Yes, and I know, again, lots of people moan about the commercial division at Manchester United, and some people say that pre-season tours are dictated by the commercial department because they're planning on setting up a new partnership in Malaysia or Nigeria or Australia, wherever it's going to be, and it should be driven by the manager and the football club side of things. Ultimately, what the Glazers have done very successfully, as you can see here, from a decade ago when they were just making over £100 million a year to 279, whoever has been responsible for that does deserve a lot of credit. Because that money goes in to pay the wages of the players. That money goes in to fund transfers. And even in what was a really tough year for Manchester United, just look how far ahead they are of the clubs that United are worrying about. So they're £90 million a year ahead of Liverpool in terms of commercial revenue, and Liverpool clearly seen as a big rival.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking at the wages. I didn't actually know. I didn't know that there was such big emphasis on Champions League bonuses within our players' contracts. We've got such big players at the club, and you expect them to be given all the necessary payments and requirements to be able to meet that maximum wage packets that they can. But just looking at these figures and just looking at them from, again, someone who doesn't know much, from my point of view, actually United have been quite savvy into making sure that there's a big determination within the team to get that Champions League position, because the players will be financially better off for it, right?
Yes, what we see in modern football is that a player's contract is no longer written on the back of a napkin and it says you're getting 20 grand a week plus 5 grand for every goal. Contracts tend to be very long, they tend to be very detailed, and there is a huge incentive element. It varies from club to club. I think Spurs have probably got the biggest incentives built into their model. Daniel Levy is a very smart operator and a very good negotiator. This indicates a fall of 15% in the wage bill. And remember, Manchester United didn't furlough anybody. So the government, it's not a case of the government picking up some of this wage bill. And again, you will not get me saying nice things about the Glazers ever. I'm an old school football fan, but they did the right thing. I think they were aware of how Manchester United fans were likely to react. You've only got to see what happened in Liverpool when Liverpool tried to use the furlough. The same at Spurs. The fans said, "This is not how we see our club being represented, and you don't understand." So United's wage bill is down. There will have been a few savings made as a result of COVID, but not many. Again, the club did commit to paying its part-time staff, and I think that was the right thing to do, and I think the club deserves credit for that. But this wage bill will probably bounce up again. Probably revert back to £300 million plus in 2020-21, partly due to the fact that the club is now back again in the Champions League, but also the accounts cover the period the 1st of July 2020 to the 30th of June 2021. And remember, you've got 10 Premier League and Europa League matches in there, plus the additional top-ups from being in the Champions League. We've got the full impact of David De Gea's new contract. We've got the signing on of Bruno Fernandes, and so on.
But then also we've got the outgoing of Alexis Sanchez as well, who we know was a massive earner at United, and potentially a few more as well that have been moved on. So who knows where that's going to be? But do you expect it to be above the 3-3-2 that was the peak in 2019 then, or do you expect it to still be slightly lower than that?
I think it will be a wee bit lower. Nobody's quite sure what the position is with Alexis Sanchez. There has been talk that Manchester United have paid him off from the final year of his contract. They've given him X million pounds because it's better to give him half of a large sum and get him out of the club than to pay him the full amount and just have him sulking around in the reserves.
Can I ask you one question quickly as I flick through another a few more wage slides, and guys, get in the comments if you've got any questions. Hit like, subscribe, share this video, because this is a fantastic talk and walkthrough of actually the financial situation at Manchester United, but also put some realism around these results, which I think is great. But just looking at this here, I don't know if it's highlighted on the screen. United's wages, £56 for every £100 of income. What percent? So that's about, in terms of where that is as a percentage. What percent is normal within business of the size of Manchester United? And I keep coming back to this, but again, I think it's right to put a little bit of realization on it, because obviously that's quite a big amount on compared to income. But as I know, working in business and working in sales, someone could be selling something for £2 and only making 20 to 30p off it, which isn't a massive margin. This looks relatively stable when I look at that number like that. Would you go along with that assumption?
Yes, I mean, UEFA say that if you are spending more than 70% of your revenue on wages, then they describe that as a red flag. And that is something which they're concerned about. If you drop down into the Championship in the EFL, the average club is spending £107 in wages for every £100 of revenue, and we've got some clubs spending more than 200. Manchester United are normally the first or second in the wage bill as far as the Premier League is concerned.
As this graph shows, sorry, as you're talking, Kieran.
Yep. But as a proportion of their income, they're actually always tend to be in the bottom six. So that is a sign that they are not spending all of the money coming in. It is going on other things, but you would there's no reason why the club should not be successful. So those people will say that Manchester United aren't spending the wages. That's not the case. They're always in the top two. Are they not spending money on as far as transfers? And I would have updated this. I was creating this thread. I'll get on to transfers when I get back to it. But again, the indications is that the money has been spent. The club, as part of the press release, said that we have spent more money on players on a net spend basis over the last 3 or 4 windows than any other club in Europe, and that is probably a valid comment.
You have done a little bit on transfer fees though here, and in terms of who United are selling and what we're doing in terms of spreading out the payments as well. Look, again, we've invested, haven't we? And we've invested actually on a similar pattern, it looks here, to other years dating back to 2017.
Yes, and also look what has happened since Sir Alex left. The paradox of Manchester United is when they weren't spending huge sums, they were delivering Premier League trophies on a regular basis. And had they spent more and more money following Sir Alex leaving, they've not managed to deliver the trophy, which I think is now beginning to be the focus of Manchester United fans' attention. It certainly is. As I work at the University of Liverpool, I've many colleagues who, since May, have been getting, or rather since they won it in around about May, they've been very, very giddy, and rightly so. That they were by far the best team in the Premier League last season. That Premier League trophy is the big one. For many, I think it's bigger than the Champions League itself, because it gives you bragging rights. If you're a Manchester United fan, it gives you bragging rights over Liverpool, and vice versa. If you're a Manchester City fan, it gives you bragging rights over Manchester United. If you're a Chelsea fan, it gives you bragging rights over Spurs and Arsenal. So it is, I think for fans, if I was a fan, it would be the one I'd want to win most of all.
If you want to see more of the breakdowns at Kieran Maguire, go and check him out on Twitter. Make sure to give him a follow as well, and comment on the stuff. And any more questions as well, throw them Kieran's way. I've got two last questions for you, Kieran, before we end this podcast, this chat. Thank you for being so patient and answering every question in such detail. I really, really appreciate it. But my final one is, we spoke a little bit at the start around situations involving United and where we are financially, and I've tried to get, so to speak, close to concrete answers from you. So I'm going to ask this one outright. What state are United in financially then? Are we in a good position moving forward, coming out of COVID potentially in the new year and fans returning to stadiums? Or could you see this really hitting United hard if fans are not back in stadiums until next season?
United are in as good a position as they could hope to be. If we take a look at what's happened to their cash position, cash has fallen by around about £250 million compared to June 2019. Contributory factor to that is COVID. A contributory factor is that they've not had the cash from season ticket renewals for 2020-21 because they didn't know exactly what was happening. And the third issue is that they have spent money on players. In terms of, I believe the Harry Maguire deal was a cash deal, and things of that nature. So their cash position has fallen significantly, but they've arranged an overdraft facility. Now, arranging an overdraft facility is not the same as actually having an overdraft. So that's a backup plan. It is, in my view, essential that fans do return. I think from a player's perspective, it's no fun playing in front of an empty stadium. I think from the fans' perspective, it's no fun watching on television matches taking place in an empty stadium. Also, I can say as a football fan myself, I miss the football match day. Because football's more than 90 minutes. We all know that. It's meeting up with those old friends before matches. It's standing next to those people that you've stood next to for years, and cheering and booing and shouting obscenities at Mike Dean and his friends. That's what football's all about. And yes, it will help the club financially, but that should really be a secondary issue. Manchester United are in a solid position, as solid as you could expect. The longer that COVID continues and the government, remember, this is a government decision that fans can't attend matches, as long as that decision is upheld, then I think things are going to deteriorate in football in general. But I don't think Manchester United are going to be at the head of the queue of clubs that I'm worrying about financially.
We could do a whole show on my next question, Kieran, but just briefly, I'm going to ask it to you as a guy who studies finances, and you've looked over a number of clubs' finances, and obviously the Premier League, Champions League, and what that brings to clubs. The European Super League, over $4 billion apparently up for grabs if clubs enter that. Is it viable?
Yes, it is viable. It's been coming. It's been discussed by club owners behind closed doors in WhatsApp groups over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, I've been in conferences, in meetings myself, and I'm just a teacher. But yeah, you get to hear the whispers. The aim is to have a 16 or 18 club European Premier League, European Super League, World Soccer Conference. Who knows what it's going to be called, because it will make a fortune for owners. So what is required is that the only way that you can achieve that, if you think about it, if you've got an 18-team European Super League, then that's going to have 36 fixtures. Then you move to the knockout round. So we could be talking 42 matches of European football for each club. You cannot do that if you've got a Premier League, which has 20 clubs. You cannot do that if you've got 2 domestic cup competitions. So Project Big Picture was actually a sideshow to what we're seeing in terms of these proposals for an expanded European competition.
As I said, we could do a whole show on it. FIFA apparently are coming out now and saying that they wouldn't back it. Of course they wouldn't. Come on, here's some cash, FIFA. Yes, you will. But we'll wait and see what happens there. Kieran, maybe if anything more of this comes out, we could do a whole show on it and chat some more then. It's been absolutely fantastic having you on. Thank you for answering every question in such detail and giving every single United fan out there some real answers and some concrete answers to be able to go off the back of, if obviously this is of interest to them. Guys, please hit like and subscribe to the channel, the All for United channel. I'll have another one of these next week. Kieran, for now, where can people go and find out more information about your project, Price of Football? And obviously I've mentioned your Twitter before, but please say it again.
Well, I do a podcast twice a week with comedian and writer Kevin Day. People might know him from Match of the Day, and we look at the business of football. We thought the show was going to be a complete disaster, but we've had over 1 million downloads now. Because we look at all aspects of football, and on Twitter, I put out charts on a regular basis at Kieran Maguire. And if you want to know more, cheekily over my shoulder is a book, or that shoulder. I'm trying to work out which shoulder it is, that one. I've written a book called The Price of Football, which is looking at the finances of the game, some of the weird ways that clubs deal with players, with stadiums, and with ownership models and things of that nature. And all of the proceeds of that book, all of the royalties, are going to the Trussell Trust, which is a food bank charity. It compared to the likes of Marcus Rashford and the amazing work he's done, it's a pittance, but it's generating a few grand for that charity, which is close to my heart.
It all massively helps. Go and grab the book, The Price of Football. Check out Kieran's Twitter account, and you'll be able to find the links to be able to go in and download, buy, and also check out the podcast too. Kieran, once again, thank you for coming on and discussing that. We'll be sharing a link out. Please, guys, make sure you share it as well, and be around this weekend. Loads of content coming up right here on All for United, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you, Kieran. Bye for now.
Thank you.